Hey everyone, and welcome back. Get ready because today we're jumping into something pretty special, a real piece of gaming history.
We are indeed. We're talking about the Neo Geo.
The Neo Geo, that legendary console that basically promised to beam the arcade right into your house.
That was the whole pitch, wasn't it? It wasn't just like the arcade, it aimed to be the arcade right there in your living room. A genuine, undiluted experience.
Exactly. And that's what made it so intriguing back then. Other consoles, they often felt a bit, well, compromised compared to the coin-op originals.
Right, like a slightly watered down version.
Yeah. But the Neo Geo, it just swaggered in, promising arcade perfect, no compromises.
And delivering a lot of the time. It really made you wonder, could you actually get that full throttle arcade feeling at home? No sacrifice?
It seemed almost too good to be true.
Uh-huh. And that's what we're going to unpack today. To really understand the Neo Geo, you've got to look at where SNK, the company behind it, came from.
Okay, yeah, let's start there. SNK wasn't exactly new to the game when the Neo Geo appeared, right? They were already a force in the arcades.
Oh, absolutely. SNK Shinihan Kikaku, originally they'd been making arcade games for years by the late 80s. They were pretty successful.
I remember some of their stuff like Ikari Warriors, that game with a twisty joystick.
That's the one. Classic. And things like Psycho Soldier, which was pretty cool with its psychic powers, or POW Prisoners of War, a tough side-scrolling beat-em-up.
Right, so they knew how to make compelling arcade games, games people wanted to pump quarters into.
Definitely. They had a real knack for it, engaging, challenging, often visually quite impressive for the time. That arcade success really set the stage for what came next.
Which was the MVS, the multi-video system. That sounds important.
Hugely important. The MVS, launched around 1990, was frankly brilliant for arcade operators.
How so?
Well, instead of buying a whole massive, expensive cabinet for every single new game, arcade owners could buy an MVS motherboard and then just slot in different game cartridges. Relatively cheaper cartridges. One cabinet could suddenly hold like 2, 4, even 6 different SNK games.
Wow, okay. So players could choose from a menu.
Exactly. Massive flexibility for the arcade owner, saved them money, meant more SNK games got out onto arcade floors. It was a huge hit.
So the MVS is booming in arcades. How does that translate into a home console? That seems like a big leap.
It does, but SNK saw an opportunity. They figured there was this core group of, really dedicated arcade fanatics.
The hardcore players.
Yeah, the ones who didn't just want to play Fatal Fury or whatever down at the arcade. They wanted that exact experience, pixel for pixel, at home. They weren't satisfied with the ports on other systems.
Which often had cut animations or fewer colors.
Precisely. So around the same time as the MVS, 1990 again, they launched the Neo Geo AES. The Advanced Entertainment System, the home version.
And the killer app, the big promise, was that it played the exact same games.
That was the bombshell, revolutionary for the time. The cartridges, the AES carts for home, were internally pretty much identical to the MVS carts used in the arcades.
So when they said arcade perfect,
they meant it. Same graphics, same sound, same gameplay, no cut corners. You bought Art of Fighting for your AES, you were getting the Art of Fighting from the arcade cabinet.
that's incredible. I heard it started as a rental thing in Japan first. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. An interesting way to sort of test the water, see if people would actually bite before committing to a full, very expensive retail launch.
And when it did launch properly, the marketing was pretty bold, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Bigger, badder, better. The future is now. Things like that.
Isn't exactly so.
No. But it got the message across. This thing was powerful. It was premium. It was a step beyond the competition.
And it sounds like they knew who they were selling it to. Not your average kid saving up allowance money.
Definitely not. They were targeting serious gamers, older gamers probably, with disposable income, people who valued that arcade authenticity above all else and were willing to pay for it.
So it was a dual strategy then.
Yeah.
MVS builds the hype in arcades.
And the AES delivers that same hyped experience at home for the elite who could afford it. Pretty clever, actually.
Okay, so the promise is huge. Arcade games at home. But what was actually inside the AES that let it pull this off? Let's look under the hood.
All right. Well, compared to its 16-bit rivals, the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, the Neo Geo was a beast.
How so?
Its main processor, a Motorola 68000, the same family as the Genesis actually, but running much faster, 12 megahertz compared to around 7.6 for the Genesis or 3.5 for the SNES.
A significant speed difference.
Yeah. And it had a Zilog Z80 coprocessor running at 4 MHz, often handling the sound, just like many arcade boards did.
Okay, sounds powerful. But the graphics were the real showstopper.
That's where it truly shone. The custom graphics hardware.
Wow.
It could display 4,096 colors on screen simultaneously.
4,096. That's way more than the SNES or Genesis, wasn't it?
Oh, vastly more. They managed maybe a couple hundred on screen, typically. The Neo Geo's palette was over 65,000 colors it could choose from.
That explains the vibrant look of the games. What about sprites? Arcade games needed lots of moving things.
And the Neo Geo delivered. It could handle up to 380 sprites on screen at once. And crucially, these could be large, detailed sprites. Plus, it had hardware sprite scaling, making them bigger or smaller smoothly, and something called sprite chaining.
Chaining, what's that?
It let developers link smaller sprite elements together to build much larger, more complex characters or objects without crippling the hardware. Think about the massive bosses in Metal Slug.
Oh yeah, huge.
Or just the sheer size and detail of the fighters in Art of Fighting. That was the Neo Geo's graphics power flexed to the max.
And you needed somewhere to store all that graphical data.
Which brings us to the cartridges. They were enormous. Legendary. We're talking physically huge, yes, but also in terms of memory capacity. While SNES or Genesis carts were maybe topping out around 16 megabits, maybe a bit more later.
Neo Geo carts started way bigger than that, didn't they?
They started around 20, 30, 50 megabits and quickly blew past 100. That whole 100 megashock marketing line wasn't just hype.
Wow.
It was a real threshold they crossed regularly. You needed that space for all the high-resolution art, the countless frames of animation for smooth movement, the high-quality sound sample.
Well, later games got even bigger.
Oh, yeah, much bigger. King of Fighters 97 was over 500 megabits. Garou. Mark of the Wolves pushed close to 700.
That's insane for the time. Now, that memory must have been expensive. Was that the main reason for the high cost, or?
That was a huge factor, yes. ROM chips weren't cheap, especially in those quantities. Plus, the cartridges themselves were pretty complex, robust things compared to standard console carts. More expensive to manufacture.
Right. Which leads us to the price tag. We hinted at it, but how much are we talking?
Brace yourself. At launch in the US, the console itself, the AES system, was around $649.99.
$650 in 1991 money.
Yep. Compare that to the SNES and Genesis, which launched around $199.99.
Ouch. And the games.
The games were the real killer. Routinely, $200 to $300 each.
$200 for one game.
Sometimes more. Building even a small Neo Geo library was a serious financial commitment.
Okay, so this confirms it. This wasn't for everyone. This was niche, very niche.
Absolutely. It cemented its status as a luxury item. The Rolls-Royce of game consoles, as people often called it. It was for the dedicated arcade enthusiast with very deep pockets.
For most of us back then, owning one was just a dream, something you read about in magazines.
Exactly. You'd see the screenshots, read about these perfect arcade conversions, but that price put it firmly out of reach, made it almost mythical.
All right, so incredibly powerful, incredibly expensive. But the core appeal was the games. Did they actually deliver on that arcade perfect promise consistently?
I'd say overwhelmingly yes. The library was the Neo Geo. It was built almost entirely on SNK's own fantastic arcade output. And that core promise, you were getting the real deal.
Big sprites, smooth animation.
Beautifully drawn, huge sprites,
Yeah.
silky smooth animation, that parallax scrolling effect giving depth, and really high-quality sound. It felt authentic.
And when you think Neo Geo games, you immediately think fighting games, right? SNK really carved out a name for itself there.
Absolutely. While Street Fighter II was dominating, SNK came out swinging with its own incredible fighting franchises. You had Fatal Fury.
Terry Bogard.
The Hat.
Haha, yeah. Terry, Andy, Joe Higashi. And the original had that interesting two-plane system you could jump between.
Then there was Art of Fighting. Those sprites were massive.
Unbelievably huge for the time. Plus the spirit gauge, the zooming camera effect, even visible damage on the characters.
Yeah.
Very dramatic.
And Samurai Showdown. Weapon combat felt so different. It really did. More deliberate, high stakes, big damage hits. That rage gauge mechanic was cool too. And the whole aesthetic, feudal Japan, characters like Homaru, Nakoru, just iconic.
So good. And you can't forget the King of Fighters. That became massive.
KOF was huge. The 3-on-3 team battles, bringing characters together from Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, even other SNK games like Ikari Warriors and Psycho Soldier, it became an annual institution.
It really defined a whole era of 2D fighters.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just fighters, was it? I mean, Metal Slug, come on.
Metal Slug, what a masterpiece. That game and its sequels were just pure Neo Geo flexing. The fluidity of the hand-drawn animation is still stunning today.
Incredible detail, the humor, the crazy actors.
It's pure arcade bliss. But they had other strong showings too. Sports games, for instance.
Oh yeah, like what?
Super Sidekicks was a popular soccer series. Baseball Stars Professional and its sequel were great arcade baseball games. And Neo Turf Masters.
I've heard people rave about that one.
Many consider it one of the best arcade golf games ever made. Really satisfying mechanics, great presentation.
And shoot-em-ups too, shmups.
Definitely. They had some excellent ones. Blazing Star, Polestar, Last Resort. Visually impressive, tough as nails. Exactly what arcade shooter fans wanted.
So there was this definite SNK style across the board.
Yeah, you could often tell an SNK game. Bold colors, big, well-defined sprites, and that Yamaha sound chip gave everything a really punchy, high-quality audio feel. It wasn't about quantity like the libraries on SNES or Genesis. It was about the quality and impact of these specific arcade experiences.
Which ties into that whole luxury aspect again. Owning a Neo Geo wasn't just about the games, it was kind of a status symbol, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. It said, I'm a serious arcade connoisseur. I demand authenticity and I can afford it. It set you apart.
In a world of more affordable consoles, the Neo Geo owner was in a very small, very exclusive club.
Exactly. The price naturally made it that way. It was
Yeah.
this high-end piece of tech that just looked and felt expensive.
And everything about it felt premium, right? The console itself was hefty.
Solidly built. And those controllers, proper arcade sticks with micro switches that clicked satisfyingly.
Like having a mini arcade panel in your hands.
Pretty much. Even the cartridges, being so large and robust, felt substantial. And don't forget the memory card.
Ah, yes. You could save your game.
You could save your progress on the AES at home. And then this was the cool part. Potentially take that card to an arcade with a compatible MVS machine and continue your game.
No way. That really bridged the gap.
It did. It further blurred that line. But ultimately, the real luxury was knowing the games themselves were totally uncompromised. You weren't getting a port, you were getting the real arcade game. That was the ultimate value proposition for those who could afford it.
But that affordability was the main issue, wasn't it? Despite all the power, the great games, the Neo Geo never really broke into the mainstream.
Not even close. The price was just too high. Simple as that. For the cost of a Neo Geo, maybe 2 or 3 games, you could get an SNES or Genesis and a whole stack of titles.
Yeah, the value proposition for the average gamer just wasn't there.
Right, so while Nintendo and Sega were selling tens of millions of consoles worldwide,
Neo Geo sales were much, much lower.
we're talking maybe hundreds of thousands in total for the AES over its entire lifespan. A tiny fraction.
And the competition was fierce anyway,
Yeah.
with the 16-bit console war raging.
Intense competition. Plus, by the mid-90s, you had the arrival of the Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. The shift towards 3D graphics started in earnest.
And suddenly, the Neo Geo's amazing 2D sprite work started to look.
A bit dated, perhaps, to the wider market chasing the novelty of 3D polygons. Even though Neo Geo games often looked artistically superior, the trend was towards 3D.
SNK tried to adapt, didn't they? With the Neo Geo CD.
They did. The Neo Geo CD aimed to slash game prices by using CDs instead of expensive cartridges. A good idea on paper.
But
the loading times were atrocious. Really long waits between levels or even before fights, which killed that snappy arcade feel.
oof, not ideal.
They released a Neo Geo CDZ later with a faster CD drive, which helped, but the damage was kind of done and the market had moved on.
And they tried handhelds too. The Neo Geo Pocket?
Yeah, the Neo Geo Pocket and then the Neo Geo Pocket Color. Fantastic little handhelds, actually. Great clicky stick. Good battery life. Some really charming games.
But up against the Game Boy Color.
Exactly. Tough battle. Nintendo just dominated that space. So while admirable efforts, they didn't achieve major success either.
Yet despite not being a massive seller, the Neo Geo's legacy is undeniable. It has such a dedicated following even now.
It really does. That Neo Geo mystique is powerful. The exclusivity, the quality, the focus on pure arcade action. It resonates.
And original consoles and games are serious collector's items now, right? Fetching crazy prices.
Oh, astronomical prices for some of the rare AES carts especially.
Yeah.
We're talking thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. It's a collector's dream or nightmare, depending on your budget.
Wow. But thankfully, the games themselves are more accessible now.
Much more so. Thanks to numerous compilations on modern consoles, digital releases, and reliable emulation, people can easily experience these classics today without needing the original expensive hardware.
So the spirit lives on.
Absolutely. The Neo Geo remains this potent symbol of a specific time peak 2D arcade gaming brought home without compromise. It represents quality, authenticity, and maybe a touch of that exclusive luxury appeal.
So yeah, the Neo Geo, the ultimate home arcade, the Rolls-Royce, prioritizing that perfect arcade feel above all else, even mainstream success. Its legacy isn't about units sold, it's about the passion it still inspires.
Definitely. Peak 2D sprite work, peak arcade conversion.
It really makes you think, though. Has any system since then, maybe even now, tried to capture that same uncompromising vision, that same focus on a specific type of experience, even if it meant a really high cost or limited audience?
That's a fascinating question. Has anything truly aimed for that level of singular focus and cost-be-damned quality?
What parts of that original arcade dream, getting the absolute best, most authentic version of a game, still matter to you today? Something to ponder. Let us know what you think.
We'd love to hear it.
Join us next time as we explore another corner of gaming history. See you then.